Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on leveraging the power of generative AI in designing simulation scenarios. We're thrilled to host this conversation with the authors of the recently published article, Development of a Prompt Template to Support Simulation Design, Maximizing the Potential of Generative Artificial Intelligence. I'm Courtney McNulty, and I am with Unbound Medicine. And today joining me are four distinguished panelists who bring a wealth of experience in nursing education, simulation, and technology integration. It's Dr. Elizabeth Robison, Teresa Cooney, Dr. Tammy Schwab, and Sammy Rahman. We're excited about the ideas we'll cover today and the opportunities these innovations present. Please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A or comment section throughout the session. We'll address as many as possible during our Q&A segment at the end. But we have a lot of information to cover today, so we are going to dive right in. And I want to ask the group, what inspired the four of you to explore generative AI for simulation design with the Odin Simulation Committee?
I'll go ahead and start off the conversation, and thanks to all who's enjoying this webinar today, and those that may chime in on the recording. This was a passion project, as I would call it. We were preparing for a workshop for the Odin Convention, and we wanted to focus that workshop on generative AI. And I felt like, anytime you have a workshop, what could we come up with that would provide a hands-on experience and learners could take home something that they could use in their workplace. And so that was the kind of seed that was planted for me, and then working with my colleagues here on coming up with something we could do under simulation design. And that was kind of the seed that was planted. And from there, it kind of grew. We nurtured it and grew, just like anything. So that's kind of my perspective, how we came up with that.
I'd probably add, that we're all probably early adopters of technology. And I think when we were looking at generative AI and what it could do for us, we thought scenario development and design is so time consuming and requires a lot of creativity. And we thought there was big potential to use Gen AI kind of to assist us, in making that process a little easier.
Well, I can step in next. Certainly, one of the things that I noted with AI in general is there was a lot of fear surrounding it, and certainly a lot of colleagues and educators around the country had lots to kind of say about it and lots of concerns. And I really felt a little bit differently. I saw that there could be an opportunity to help educators, as Tammy said, find ways to take things at a better pace and maybe come up with some of these opportunities, and particularly in simulation, and see that it's something very positive can come from the use of AI. But as we'll talk about later, there certainly are aspects of using generative AI to look out for and to take care with.
And for myself, not only are we all friends, but we're all members of the Odin Simulation Committee. And I feel like when nurse educators join their national organization, they look at the committees for being cutting edge. What is the pulse in America right now in simulation for nurse educators? And so I thought, I want to be an early adopter. I want to embrace this technology. And so this project was perfect to get my feet wet.
Thank you all. Oh, yes. And Teresa, you mentioned you're all friends. I think it's important that we also establish you are all at different institutions. Some of us might be preferment, not totally retirement, but you all come from different locations. So how did that collaboration across the different colleges strengthen the quality of realism of your final template?
I'll jump
We
in
really,
with that. Oops.
okay, sorry. We really wanted to kind of have a diversity when it comes to how we designed the template and what our final output would be. And so we come from Florida, Texas, and two of us from Maryland. So Liz, what AI did you use and what was your case study?
So my background is primarily in the adult health arena. And so that's my comfort zone is in a adult. And so I picked heart failure because it was one that I found doing in simulation. I had both for new learners and senior learners. So I've always kind of rallied around that perfect, I hate to say perfect case, but heart failure brings in so many different concepts. So I wanted to see what generative AI could do with that. So I used one that I started out with quite a bit because I had a Microsoft account, which was Copilot. But then OpenAI, everybody was using OpenAI at the time. And so I used ChatGPT, but I used the 4 mini that came out after the 4.0. And so I decided to use a more recent model that came out shortly after we started the project to see what difference the two model outputs had.
And Sammy, what kind of case study did you decide to try?
Well, my background is more naturally pediatrics, and so I looked at basically as an adolescent patient with sickle cell disease in crisis, and that kind of really came together. My two platforms that I chose initially were Microsoft Copilot because our institution had adopted that, as well as ChatGPT.
Okay. And Tammy, what about you?
Well, my background is pediatric ICU, but I did not pick a case that was consistent with my background. I picked an adult COPD exacerbation. I can't honestly remember why. This was a year ago when we did this project. It was more than a year ago now,
Yeah,
actually.
fair enough.
I think we were testing in October of 24. But it must have been something that just caught my fancy at that moment. And I use the two platforms I used were ChatGPT, but I used the 4.0, so the version before the one Liz used. And I used Copilot because that was what my institution was using and is still using at the time.
And then when I looked at what the other ladies were doing, I thought, let me do a little twist. I chose to use ChatGPT because that was my very first introduction to artificial intelligence, so I was comfortable with it. And then I went on to Poe.com and I found Claude. And I thought, well, that sounds good. Let me throw in something different than the other ladies did. And I just chose Claude. My background is pediatric ICU. And so I thought, it probably does a good job creating pediatric case studies. So I kind of wanted to see if I could trick AI. And I thought, let's make it a little bit more challenging. And I chose a cystic fibrosis teen with an infection who happens to be on hormone therapy for transitioning to a woman. So I wanted to see if that hormone therapy and transgender identification, what the output would actually generate. So that's the reason why I chose that.
Thank you all. It's so fun to see how that collaboration comes together and how with different backgrounds and different visions, you were able to get together enough for the article to maximize this opportunity. And the article really emphasizes structured prompt engineering. So could one of you explain what that means in simple terms? I know we have some educators that might be well-versed in AI and some that are starting to play around with it a bit now.
Yeah, so that term prompt engineering is really a term that has come out with generative AI. And essentially, when we think of that term engineering, it's a structure. When we think of engineers, they're kind of that structure. So we found that it was important on how we structured our words. That's the prompt piece of it to be able to generate good output. And there is an art, and I think as you are chatting with your bot and the different platforms you use, you find that you're refining that art, that structure, and providing a little bit more of a background for how best to engage with that chat bot in an engineering standpoint to be able to have that output reflect what you're thinking. And when I get into the literature about generative AI, especially the nursing literature, I see that word prompt engineering always come out as the first skill. When you're using any technology, there's a skill to it. So the skill is prompt engineering. And we'll go into a little bit, the article goes in a little bit in that discussion of some structure or formatting that you may want to use within prompt engineering to have a more consistent output. But that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. And how did you align your prompt development with the healthcare simulation standards of best practice and the NLN simulation design template?
So when we initially discussed our strategy, we thought we don't need to reinvent the wheel here, right? We already determined that the best way to ensure quality and rigor when designing our AI-assisted simulation really was to follow our simulation's gold standard of using Enaxel's hospital simulation standards of best practice for the simulation design. And then our efforts are also guided by using the most recognized framework structure that we use in nursing education, which was the NLN simulation template for our purposes. So that was our launching off point, was the NLN simulation template.
Thank you, Teresa. And I think that is very helpful context to give that was your jumping off point, because I think we come into, and one of the questions that I'm sure many people have is, what were some of the biggest misconceptions or errors that AI made that human expertise, with knowing the template and the healthcare simulation standards, that human expertise had to correct?
You want me to start, Teresa?
Sure.
Okay. I'll talk a little bit about that. We all compared notes when we received our outputs from the different platforms. And I think one of the first things I noticed when I received my outputs were how uniform some of the case demographics were. So when I input my prompts into ChatGPT and Copilot for my COPD exacerbation, I got back the exact same gender, age, including the exact identical date of birth with year, the race, the comorbidities. So all of those things were identical across the platforms I used, which really surprised me. And I thought, that's really interesting. Is it because of the way the systems were trained? Are they biased? Were the humans training them biased, in these stereotypical presentations of certain medical diagnoses? So I thought, oh, wow, the educator really needs to evaluate that and say, is that my intent? Do I want to deliver it that way or not, to my students? Or is that something to revise or discuss? I think the other big thing that I noticed was with the kind of preparation materials that we give students. So for some of those pre-briefing activities, that prompt part of the template, there were a lot of inaccuracies and inconsistencies with the cognitive and psychomotor skills that it offered. So they really were, in my opinion, irrelevant cognitive activities. So I had to do a lot of revision there to make them fit what I felt would adequately prepare the students for the scenario. So I was kind of surprised that, it didn't quite get that right. And, I think we learned, and we'll probably talk about this more, how we really need to revise some of the prompts to get a little bit better output. So those were two of the big things that I saw. I know Teresa had a few additional ones.
Right. I had similar experiences like Tammy did. I remember the two cystic fibrosis scenarios. The portacath was inserted the same month 2 years ago, which I thought was interesting. But one noticeable difference that I noticed that really required me to step in and use my expertise was when I inputted the time frame of the simulation. So when we took the NLN template and we took the prompt from NLN template that stated what would be the expected interventions for this simulation scenario within 5-minute intervals, what we discovered was that AI designed 20 minutes worth of sim that was so outrageously over ambitious. And when I looked at that, I recognized that what the AI had spit out for the first basically 5 to 7 minutes for my students, that would take the entire 20, 30 minutes to accomplish. And so I actually had to enter a prompt to get them to scale it down and remove some of the pieces so that it was more realistic for my students. And that was for both ChatGPT and Claude. And I believe that all of us had also recognized similar experiences with the products that they used.
Thank you, Tammy and Teresa. I think that gives great insight into where that human intervention is needed, because you, again, are those experts. You know the content, you know your students, you know how long something is going to take. And so you have had plenty of practice with developing your prompts and revising them. So is there a way, or can you explain a bit, how do frameworks like CLEAR or task, role, audience, context, instructions influence your prompt writing process?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about prompt engineering, and that those two terms are key. So I searched the literature. There's two great articles that are referenced in our article about prompt engineering, one from Sun and one from Shepard and Greichheimer. And Sun has done a lot of writing in nursing literature on generative AI. So this really attracted me. And Sun introduced the structured framework for prompt engineering called CLEAR, which is focused on concise, logic, explicitness, adaptiveness. I like these long words, reflectiveness. So that's where the CLEAR, we come up with these acronyms. The CLEAR acronym came from. The other one that attracted me was Shepard and Greichheimer's, which is that task. So what do you want that generative AI chatbot to do? The task, the role. What is your role? For us, it was we wanted to think like a healthcare, that somebody who's certified as a healthcare simulation educator. I mean, we want to make sure it thinks in that logic. What is the audience? We want this targeted for a certain audience. And then what do you want that context to be? That scenario development piece of it. And then the instructions specific. You are guiding that prompt engineering with really clear information. And so using some sort of framework to guide how you're thinking about developing your prompts, I think, is important as you learn the different generative AI tools and you practice which one would work for whatever you're trying to develop. So I love a framework. And I think in nursing, frameworks, we're attracted to frameworks because we have frameworks on everything in nursing. So for us, our brain thinks like a framework. So that's what really attracts me to using a framework approach in learning how to best prompt engineer.
I love that. I love the context within nursing as well. You have the frameworks, you have the templates, use them to your advantage. You can put them in and have the generative AI do the work for you. And then we go back to that human expertise. So my next question, I am going to combine with one of our first questions from the audience, is what surprised you most when you first began comparing the outputs from different AI tools? And the question we received was, why does it matter which one you use? And I think that can be addressed with some of the experiences.
Well, I think we certainly walked through this and found that certainly you can go to the background and research that each of these products that we've talked about already were, in some cases, we chose them because it was what was available to us or what we might have been familiar with. Each of these products can be kind of given different accolades, but our challenge was, as stated a little bit earlier, we found how similar the outputs were as we put the information together. We put the exact same prompts essentially into ChatGPT in my case and in Copilot. And as I found out, I got a profile of a patient with a similar name, similar birthdays, similar identification of the patient and those types of details, which was like almost shocking that you'd have what we considered two different platforms, but they came out pretty similarly. And so with that, you know, each of them, each of these platforms have some accolades that talk about their expertise in summarizing and maybe reliable or data that comes from information, resourced information better than the others. But to see this so plainly in the very beginning was a very big surprise. And we didn't absolutely choose platforms that now there's so many more, because we're not really trying to sell a platform to anyone or to say only use this, because I think they're getting better. They're iterative by nature. ChatGPT is now up to a 5.0 level and moving forward as we speak, as well as the iterations for Microsoft Copilot are changing, and then a number of others have surfaced up, including, you know, versions like Perplexity and so forth. So it's not such a problem or a challenge in the choosing, because they can and do very similar things. It's just determining what level and the cost and what's accessible to you, and maybe what your institution will allow you to use, because that's the case for me. I have the outside ability to use one, but we have a platform that our institution has adopted as well.
Thank you, Sammy. I think that certainly answered the question of what you saw when you compared them, and then which one you would recommend or not recommend specifically, because we do certainly talk about quite a few. And so flowing right into that, when you compared these models, the ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, were there any distinct strengths or weaknesses that stood out specifically for simulation design?
I can start that one off. One thing that I did notice had to do with the debriefing aspect of the template. ChatGPT gave me DML when I asked for debriefing with meaningful learning. I asked for questions for the sim, and they gave them to me very detailed. However, Claude did not even understand what DML was, and instead they just gave me just basic Socratic method types of questions. So then I realized, well, Claude hasn't been trained yet, right? So that's probably why they weren't able to give me the output, whereas ChatGPT probably has been trained. So that was one big difference that I noticed.
One of the surprises for me is I did start out with using ChatGPT 4.0 when we started this project initially. And when you look at our article, you see that pretty much 3 out of the 4 of us used the ChatGPT 4.0 as a model choice. And Sammy put it very clearly. Really, this was more of an exploration as well for us to kind of figure out what does a better job for us in our job. Like I said, I primarily at that point used Copilot. I had been using ChatGPT, but not as readily until I kind of got into this project and was doing some other things. And so at at the time we were working on this, the 4 mini came out, I call it the small zero, the lowercase zero came out. And I thought, well, why don't at least one of us explore that? I ended up getting kind of a newsletter that gave me a little bit heads up when things were changing. And so I found it very odd at the time that the output that was generated from 4.0 was different than 4 mini, the smaller version, because 4 mini has a little bit more reasoning than the basic 4.0 did. And I understand that now, but back then I really didn't understand why this same OpenAI model, it's just a different version. Why would it be different? So I think when you're exploring which is the best to use, as Sammy put it, you may not have a choice but to use a specific type of product when you are working on things at work, because you may have restrictions. But at home, you're able to explore some different options with a personal computer. But that was surprising to me. Again, I didn't have a lot of variations in my output, but the surprise to me was within the same platform, a different output.
Thank you both. And I think we have mentioned quite a few, again, as I stated, and we've heard that there has been either some consistencies, some repetition, but also some biases in these AI generated patient profiles. How can educators mitigate those risks?
So we did see these inherent biases show up when we ran the template. One example was the sickle cell case. The patient was always African American, but we all know as educators that even though the majority of African, that race would get sickle cell, there are other races that can get it. So I thought that was interesting. And then when I ran the transgender team, there was an assumption by one of them that the teen liked men, and there was an assumption from the other one that the teen liked women. So I thought that was interesting. So the way that we mitigated these risks was, as we entered the prompt and we immediately noticed these biases, we challenged ourselves to change it for our next prompt in order to correct that hallucination or that error. Because remember, this is a trained model. So if we capture it when it happens and change it, then the rest of the scenario should unfold with that change being made. So that's how we work that out.
Thank you, Teresa. And I think this is going to sound very repetitive from my point, where I keep seeing the same things that you all have talked about, but we've been talking about. So you just were able to address those risks. And how does that relate to the phrase AI augments, not replaces, the simulationist that appears in your article? And why is that distinction so important?
I can take that. I think the bottom line is our jobs as, expert simulationists is very safe at this time. Was our takeaway. Because AI, cannot really, it can't do certain things. So, it can't make sure that you are aligned and properly integrated with your curriculum. It might have trouble with fidelity selection. It certainly can't provide psychological safety to your students. It can't do the nuanced facilitation that your students need in the moment. I think we found through this group exercise that, we needed to touch in a lot with the outputs and use our human judgment, our simulation expertise, facilitation expertise, to really refine what we received in the output to make it a good end product for our students. So while AI kind of helped maybe accelerate the process for us and make it a little more efficient, we still saw many inaccuracies, biases, things that we really had to provide that oversight to, to make sure that it was appropriate and quality for our students.
Thank you, Tammy. So with that in mind, what human-centered strategies such as fact-checking, peer validation, SME review would you recommend to ensure that clinical accuracy and provide to some educators that, again, are becoming more and more fluid in their prompting and use of AI?
Well, let me take that. I would say to you that as an educator, and I think from all of our perspective, no matter what our specialties have been in the past, in education, you have to get expertise to come and assist you in any endeavor. If I am trying to teach anything in the realm of pediatrics, I'm a lot more comfortable and confident. But the moment I have to step into maybe a different arena, I have to get some assistance. I have to review things more. I have to go back to the literature and make sure that things haven't changed and things need to be updated. Misinformation can be avoided if we find a way to be collaborative, and a collaborative design had to be considered. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we can pull together in our experiences, that leaders who will shape our future, AI future, are those with courage and foresight to place people's well-being above everything else, to guide progress responsibly. We need to be a part of change, but yet we also need to be the advocate for assuring that what we put out there, that output, is as accurate as it can be, because we know that a number of things can be said or even published and the information can be false. And that's a challenge we have to avoid, especially in our profession, and the respect that we have as nursing professionals.
That was wonderfully put, Sammy. Thank you. And it certainly does touch on some of those ethical considerations that we've spoken about as a group prior, and that we also make sure to incorporate as we have these conversations and as you're doing this work. And so as we're getting into this conversation and we think about these things, you all are very much experts in this world now. You use AI frequently, you know simulation very well. For those faculty or simulationists who are curious, but maybe a bit hesitant, where should they start using AI for their scenario design?
Yeah, I'll start that off. I clearly understand the hesitancy piece of it, especially when it comes to a new technology tool. We all have to remember back when we started in simulation and we saw all this technology, and we thought, oh, I have to learn something new. Uh, what else do I have to do for my job? I have to learn new technology. And if you were, I was in a simulation program that did not, at the time we started, we did not have a dedicated FTE for simulation. We were doing lectures, we were doing clinical rotations, and then we may have a day that we did simulation. And it wasn't, we just didn't have the manpower. And I think a lot of programs struggle with that. And then you throw on a new tool like generative AI and say, I don't have time to learn that, and clearly understand that. But I think, one of the things that the previous webinar we had, where we had Amber, who's she called herself a lagger. I don't think she's a lagger, but anyway, when you look at Rogers, diffusion of theory approach to it, she was hesitant. And I think when you're hesitant with technology, especially generative AI, think about what it can do in your personal life. So, I think about, I can't go anywhere without a GPS on, and that runs on algorithms that are artificial intelligence, a much broader use of it. But I remember earlier people said, just open your refrigerator and take a picture of the ingredients in your refrigerator and see what recipe comes up with. So I kind of did something very fun. And I think for work, you may find something very simple to start out with and see what it produces. And like Sammy had said, you may be limited to in your work computer to a particular chatbot that you can use, but ask it something very simple. And I think anytime you use technology, that KISS approach, keep it simple, is very important. And then build your confidence. That's what we tell our learners anyway. The more you do something, the more confidence you build and the more understanding you have with it. So I definitely understand the hesitancy. And I briefly mentioned about the energy consumption. Some people don't want to use it because it's going to, take energy to use it. Really, when we talk about modeling, model use, most of the energy is consumed in the training of the model. I have a little podcast I do on the side called The AI Nurse. It's on Spotify, and I have a little, they're all under 10 minutes. I have a little 6-minute thing that I go into how you can think about responsible use of AI. If you're interested, we'll drop the link to that podcast in the chat. But that's just my take on it.
One thing I might add, if I'm remembering the question again, is where to start is, go back to the frameworks. So definitely use one of the frameworks like Clear. There are many frameworks out there, but Clear is one of the ones in the nursing literature, to give you a good prompt, because having a good structured prompt is going to give you a better output and you'll be less frustrated, I think, with what you get. But just try it, think about the problems that you are encountering at work and, see if you can use AI to give you some ideas about solutions. You may like what you get, you may not, but it's definitely a place to start, I think. And just, make sure that you're using a framework to keep your prompts clean.
And I encourage all of you to use what we used because we already did the work for you. We discovered with this experiment that if we took the NLN template and put in the prompts exactly in a linear order, the way that template's set up, that we were having some errors and we weren't getting adequate output for what we wanted. So when we reordered it into a different manner, we found that we got much better results. And I believe the link will populate for our article, and then under supplement would be the revised NLN template in the specific order that we ended up using. So that may be, use that as your first step, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel, right? Give it a try, pick a topic, see what you're comfortable with, and then like the ladies mentioned, try different AI, generative AIs. Maybe you're from an institution where you're only allowed to use one type. Use it at work, but at home, you can use anything. So, decide what works best for you.
I'll just jump in with the thought that the key that I've experienced is that you have to practice. It's with anything. I mean, I play an instrument, and the only way to play that instrument well and to continue being allowed to play with other people is I have to practice. And so AI is something that's not necessarily natural to everyone, but it can be very interesting to just approach it, not to be afraid of it, to try something simple, as was mentioned earlier. Maybe ask it to write a letter for you and give it the components of what you want. The specifics of your prompts are what makes it better. And the good news is each of these platforms will say, do you want to do this, or would you like to add this? It asks you, it tries to get your input when it runs out of ideas or it is still generating some ideas. So I put that in and say, have some fun with it. Allow yourself to realize that we have to learn as it is learning too.
I think that's all excellent advice, to not reinvent the wheel, to have fun with it, to play around. Because I think although we have been using this generative AI and the models have been improving over the past 2 years, it still seems to be very much just the beginning of what is going to be changing. How do you envision AI tools changing simulation education over the next 5 years?
Well, I'll jump in on that one because I'm just going to tell you, I started doing simulation in 2007 and 2008. We didn't develop a simulation program and have simulation folks in place, and it was only 2 of us to begin with, until 2011. So time is something that we are expecting a transformation. And I really think that over the next 5 years, as fast as the platforms are learning and recognizing, and our ability to give it specific prompts or even give it an article or 2 information and to extrapolate where it was the things that we are really looking for and what we want to create. It's going to be amazing. I mean, it's just moving so quickly. And I think my colleagues have some great experiences to talk about in their even personal situations with that. It is moving rapidly, and we don't want to be left behind.
I'd probably add some things too. I think we're already starting to see it pop up in every product we use. A little AI box will pop up. You've probably seen that, in anything that you're touching in on. But for simulation specifically, I think we're definitely seeing it integrating with our mannequins, with our AV systems, and with our virtual reality software. So, having that ability to put a headset on and just talk to the patient, and they just talk back to you, because of generative AI is like amazing. So I think that's going to get teased out and get even better in the next 5 years, probably in the next 6 months. I mean, who are we kidding? I think another thing, I've been using it for, I mean, gosh, in the old days, I used to have to think about what my patient monologue would be, to pre-brief my students and get them emotionally engaged with the scenario. And I'd have to come up with these scripts, and then I'd have a friend, voice record it. Now I just use AI to do that for me, and I can choose the age and the accent and background, and I just upload my script, and maybe I've been creating my scripts, but I could use AI to create my script, and then I could upload it to another AI platform, and it just creates this great voice for me. So I just do that all the time now. I don't do that myself anymore, and I can change it anytime I want. So much easier. I think probably the thing I'm most excited about, though, and I think it still has a lot of teasing out to do, but though, is the potential for it to help us with debriefing. Because for me, I think that's the most challenging thing. It's like the heaviest cognitive load for a facilitator to observe a scenario and then have to think, okay, I'm jotting my notes. I'm thinking, what are my big things that I need to focus in on, out of the behavioral criteria. And there's a lot of potential there for AI to, if you have a recording, to analyze that. It's just kind of teasing out how much time do you need in between, a scenario and a debrief, because we're usually going straight to it. But to analyze that and give a script or guideline for a facilitator to use, that helps them with that cognitive load. So I think that's one big thing that I'm hoping will get teased out in the next 5 years.
Well, I think we lost Teresa here.
Oh, did we?
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah, she'll come back. I want to kind of discuss a little bit what Tammy, we're seeing some in the vendor space, especially those that have very what I call mature recording platforms out there. Exactly what Tammy's saying, where the recording is through the use of artificial intelligence within that platform. then are able to give that facilitator kind of a gap analysis of what occurred in the scenario. If you're able to go to the Odin convention, you'll see some of those vendors. Ask those kind of questions. So when you're looking at particular vendor products, especially when it comes to video recording, think of what that future might hold and ask those questions. Are they able to provide that to the user? And how is that turnaround time? Because we need things quick. I also did exactly what Tammy did. I usually gave them a short break. Usually it was kind of calm the nerves kind of break, bathroom break and stuff. But within 10 minutes, they came back to the debriefing room. So you have a very short time. And as a facilitator, you're in overload as well. And there's only so much you can grasp within that ability to debrief. So, being able to have something like that in a platform, I think would be a game changer when it came to debriefing.
It even makes me think about curricular integration. Could you load into AI your curriculum map and say, okay, where would sim be the most value added? What are my curricular gaps? I think there's potential in the future even to do some of that analysis because AI is really helpful with analysis and might see things where we don't see. So I think there's so much potential in the future that maybe we can't even envision. And, another thing I know it's starting to be used for is faculty development. I haven't done this yet myself, but I've heard of people who might upload themselves doing a debrief and have it give you a critique or feedback on your debrief. So I think that's kind of interesting, something I might try.
Thank you. I know we are coming into our question and answer session, so I do have a few questions for each of you. I also wanted to mention that if, as Liz said, when you're at the Odin convention, if you're able to attend to interact with the vendors, but also you are going to be able to attend a session by Teresa Cooney and Sammy Rahman on elevating the power of generative AI in developing simulation scenarios, which is session 607 on Friday, which I believe is the 21st. So that Friday 607 session. And one question that just came in, which ties right back into where we were going with the change that will be seen in simulation education, is specifically how would AI help with debriefing, and are there any specific strategies to facilitate with that for any of the models of debriefing that you each might use?
So I'm going to give a little special attention to what evolved as a result of this project and working on this article. Because you may have heard that term from Courtney Preferman. I am now retired from a state college, and I've spent my time and focused on working with generative AI tools as kind of I hate to say this, my third life venture. And one of the things that came out of this project was a development of a custom GPT that took all this work that we did and placed it into a very intuitive GPT that can allow you to create a scenario like we talked about with a lot of instructions to support the output. So we'll post that into the chat. That could be a whole session in itself. In fact, I've talked about it in a webinar with Healthy Simulation. If you follow Healthy Simulation and you have a subscription to that, you can always look at those past webinars. But it was a game changer the first time I used it, and I developed it. But when it outputted the first time, I almost fell out of my chair on how good it was in providing that. But it's only as good as the prompt engineering, which is that instruction piece that we've been talking about, that provided it guidance on what I wanted it to achieve. But that's really the beauty of collaboration. is it's limitless, because you may only think about one thing, but then you collaborate with colleagues, and these are just wonderful colleagues I've had a chance to work with, and they stimulate ideas, and you kind of feed off of that. So if you're not involved with individuals in your realm, whatever job you have in education, find that home and look at ways to collaborate, because sometimes in institutions you have an institutional think, I call it. But then when you get out of your institution, you think about how others are thinking, and wonderful ideas. And welcome back, Teresa. I understand you had an electrical outage, so welcome back.
Thank you, Liz. You mentioned the collaboration and working with this wonderful group here. So I would like to hear from the others as well, what you can say was your takeaway from working on AI collaboratively, not individually, because we know it might be a solo game at some points, but this was truly a group effort, as are most of the presentations you all work on at the convention and other conferences.
So I think we can piggy off of what Liz just said. We all decided we were going to give it a try, right? And doing it together as a group made it more fun, right? And then it was interesting to find out what we found. Others had similarities. A few of us had didn't have anything that was vastly different, right? And it was nice to be around colleagues and friends that weren't afraid to give it a try, right? It's like we want to be these early adapters. For some reason, my phone, I can use assisted AI on my phone. I don't know why I need it, but there's a button on it, right? So clearly we know AI is here to stay. So I might as well jump on the bandwagon. And it was nice to be around supportive friends and colleagues that wanted to give it a try.
I'll jump
I
in
was
here.
gonna, oh, go ahead, Sammy.
No, I mean, sorry about that. I was excited, but yet I was surrounded in some ways by folks that were very afraid and fearful. And I attended some presentations that we have to beware. Faculty are afraid of so many different challenges that they were going to have with AI. And the excitement of collaborating with folks that, as Teresa said, they were willing, to do something and then talk about it. I mean, we laughed about certain things. I generated some images, and those images had hallucinations in them, as we call them, that, created a look for a particular situation that had the nurse's legs wrapped around the bottom of the bed. And it was something to laugh at, to recognize that we're not going to be replaced as educators in this effort. But the one thing we have to remember is that there are others like us out there that are willing to step off and take a chance and try something new. And we, as early adopters, I think we call ourselves, because we were talking about it and doing things with it before many people would even be willing to say they even looked even at anything about it. And so I chime in to say, get into a group or put a group together at your college or whatever place that you're working, whether you're in a hospital setting, and talk about what you might be able to do using generative AI in your field, because it is a time saver. It's very interesting to really challenge yourself in those areas. And then we have some very creative colleagues here, and including Dr. Liz, and her ability to take the ideas that we just chat about, and the next thing you know, something's happened, or she's created a access point to where we can go in and do something even better. So please just see the value in trying it the first time.
I was just gonna add that, I have a lot of people say to me, why are you on so many committees and doing, you need to let that go because we're so overwhelmed and busy here, and I'm like, That is something I can't let go because it is my professional development and my community support. So, I feel like it's one of the most important things I do, and it doesn't just benefit me, but it benefits my institution to participate in these collaborative groups. Certainly, personally, I love the friendship and the support, but it helps me see things I would never have seen if I stayed isolated and siloed in my institution only. So that's just the one thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. I know we are coming up on the end of our time. I'm sure as nurse educators, simulationists, you all likely have a next meeting at the top of the hour. So I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our wonderful panelists, to all of those who attended. I know this is a conversation that we could go hours and hours on. And so we will certainly be hosting additional webinars. You will see a lot of familiar faces there from this group as well, as we continue to talk about generative AI and how it is evolving in education and simulation. I did also want to mention for those of you, again, that are able to attend the Odin convention, Odin and Unbound Medicine are partnering to provide professional headshots. So there will be an email going out for that. So if you joined early and our faces were on our Zooms, you'll be able to have a lovely headshot of yourself to put on that Zoom for your professional experience. This webinar was also recorded, so you will get a copy of this webinar so you can go back on and see the conversation, any of the questions that you might have missed in the chat. I did include both of the items Liz had mentioned that she worked on in the chat, and Dr. Liz is also very much on LinkedIn if you would like to search her out there to find the exciting work that she is doing. So again, thank you. We appreciate all of your time and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
I think we're always looking for new committee members too.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Shameless plug, but the Odin Virtual Simulation Review Committee, or Odin Simulation Committee as it is on the Odin website, we are always happy to have new members, and you'll get that cool Odin background as well.
Yeah, thank everyone for attending. We don't offer a certificate of attendance for these webinars. This is a volunteer effort that we share with our community. So there's no CEs. It just enhances professional development. If you need to have a certificate of participation, just take a screenshot of us. Say you were there.
You can also reach out to Unbound Medicine. I copied the name, so we will be able to provide a certificate of attendance if that's something that you're interested in. And I will just put in here the email address that you can reach out to. And you'll get a follow-up survey so you can reply to that information as well for a certificate.
Thank you,
All right,
everyone.
I'll see everybody at the convention and virtually or in person.
Looking forward to it.